I often talk about creation, fall, atonement as the story arc of life and the pillars of eternity and the stages of faith. I always kind of paint the picture by way of elevation, that creation is kind of midpoint and fall brings us down, but then atonement brings us up, and not just back to the elevation of Eden. Oh no, far beyond it. Well, if you look at these three segments, these three stages, also indicative of the 3 degrees of glory, it's as if we start in a terrestrial state, fall into a telestial existence, and then through the atonement of Christ can be raised to celestial glory. Creation is mere terrestrial. That was innocence in Eden, but God doesn't want us to maintain mere innocence. He wants us to gain true holiness. We just have to fall through a fallen world on the way. Well, if you ponder fall as telestial and atonement as celestial, terrestrial as that creation state is an interesting metaphor. The way again, that's beginning. At the end is, what did we leave if we came back in the same state? Has nothing changed? We didn't do anything wrong to go down to telestial, but we didn't become anything right to move up to celestial. Terrestrial is kind of this neutrality, this kind of, I stayed where I was. I buried my talent because I didn't want to lose anything. Well, you lost something. If you look at verse 72, here's the description of the terrestrial. Behold, these are they who died without law. They didn't know it. It wasn't there. They didn't have it. They didn't know what God expected them to become. As a result, they who are the spirits of men kept in prison, that's where they'll end up after death. But notice what comes from during this moment. Whom the Son visited and preached the gospel unto them, that they might be judged according to men in the flesh. They received not the testimony of Jesus in the flesh, but afterwards received it. Now for this, you've got to pause and really wrestle with this, because if you stay in section 76, that's kind of bad news, and it seems a little unfair, to be honest. Well, thankfully, this is just line upon line and precept upon precept, and Joseph himself is going to get some more lines and some more precepts later on. Don't read this passage in section 76 without pondering the passage in section 137, where Joseph Smith sees a vision of the celestial kingdom all over again, and notices all kinds of people that he didn't think would be there. Some he assumed would be in the terrestrial kingdom because they died without a knowledge of the fullness of the gospel. They died without law. They died without being baptized like the celestial kingdom requires. What we see in this passage is a preliminary concept. People who died without law. Oh, well, I guess they can't get to the celestial kingdom, but wait a minute, was it fair? What if they never had the chance? Well, they're going to get a chance. According to this is a preview of what we'll see in section 138. In the spirit world, they're in spirit prison. They don't know there's a paradise that they could have stepped into, but the Son visits them. This is the harrowing of hell as it's described in the Christian world. This is what Peter describes as the Lord visiting the spirits in prison so they can be judged correctly, fairly. But is it fair if the highest they can go is terrestrial? Again, the Lord will clarify that in section 137. No, if they would have accepted the fullness of the gospel with full purpose of heart, then celestial glory is theirs. No different than those who accepted it here, who did have the chance. Then what is this verse describing? Perhaps it's simply those who did have the chance to receive it in this life and didn't, but afterwards received it in the spirit world. They came to their senses, but they did have the chance. If they honestly didn't have the chance and honestly would have received it with full purpose of heart, then celestial. But if it's kind of a coming to your senses and I was wrong, is there anything I can do to make it right? Well, terrestrial glory is glorious. It's just not as glorious as God hoped they would prepare themselves to receive. You get a sense of that in the next verse, verse 75. These are they who are honorable men of the earth. who were blinded by the craftiness of men. Or in 79, these are they who are not valiant in the testimony of Jesus. Wherefore they obtain not the crown over the kingdom of our God. You see the difference between celestial and terrestrial? Between sun and moon? Between valiant and honorable? Between fighting for the testimony of Jesus because you've embraced it and received it and want the world to receive it as well, or simply relent to the obvious testimony of Jesus that becomes clear when every knee bows and every tongue confesses. It's harder to deny that in the spirit world, don't you think? Is that terrestrial glory? There seems to be some kind of neutral position, some halfway house between celestial and telestial. And that's what terrestrial is. According to verse 76 through 78, these are they who receive of his glory, that's good news, but not of his fullness, and that's the less than great news. These are they who receive of the presence of the Son, but not of the fullness of the Father. Wherefore they are bodies terrestrial and not bodies celestial, and differ in glory as the moon differs from the sun. So that's another difference. Celestial terrestrial equals sun versus moon, equals valiant versus honorable, receive versus relent, Father versus Son. In the terrestrial kingdom, you still have the ministration of the Son of God. No wonder it's a degree of glory. But you are absent the fullness of the Father. What a blessing to have received so much, but also what a loss when the Father wanted to give you so much more.